Have you ever Googled your own name? Prepare for a shock because your personal info, including addresses and phone numbers, is all out there. It's all harvested by data brokers and sold legally. Aura is a personal digital security service that scans the internet for your sensitive information and provides a full suite of privacy-enhancing tools. For a limited time, Aura is offering listeners a 14-day free trial at aura.com/safety. That's AURA.com/safety to learn more and activate the 14-day trial period.
Shares for Beginners. Weekend Watchlist.
G'day and welcome back to Shares for Beginners Weekend Watchlist, where we'll be taking a close look at an individual company, sector or ETF that you may wish to consider for your watchlist. It's not a recommendation to buy, but a way for you to learn how experts screen for value. Joining me again today is Mark Tobin from Coffee Microcaps, the home of the best freshly brewed, sustainably sourced information about the small company end of the ASX. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Phil. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. So today you're going to tell us about SDI Limited. The ASX code is SDI. SDI Limited engages in the research, development, manufacture and distribution of dental restorative materials. Can you expand on that brief description, Mark?
SDI, it's a business that basically supplies products to dentists, primarily, fillings, whitening, equipment, a lot more of these aesthetic treatments, your more cosmetic dentistry that has kind of come to the fore, I think, in the last kind of 10 or 15 years. So I guess their kind of main product or legacy product is those kind of silver amalgam fillings that some of your older listeners might have. It's not generally used kind of today. Still quite popular in emerging markets because it's generally quite a cheap product to use. And I mean, it still does the job. It just doesn't look amazing. Whereas, the more modern products are those kind of more white-based fillings that, when you see them, you kind of got to really look close to kind of discern, is it actually somebody's tooth or have they got a filling? Now, SDI, as you say, has been around for a long time. It's been listed on the stock exchange for a long time. And, I think it's a very solid business.
So where are their markets? You mentioned emerging markets. Which markets overseas are they particularly operating in?
Actually a global business. So they, export out of Australia, but they also have, setups, wholly owned subsidiaries in the UK, in the US, in Brazil. You'll find their products, according to their website, they've got in, 100 markets globally. So it truly is a global business. They've run all their R&D here in Australia. They're based down in Melbourne. They do a lot of their manufacturing primarily down in Melbourne. So it's a global business. And I think it has been going through a bit of a transition. So that old amalgam product, which, made up a lot of their sales, let's say, 5 to 10 years ago, has been slowly declining as people have and dentists themselves have kind of moved away from it. On the other hand, they have been moving into the more aesthetics and cosmetic dentistry and into the equipment side as well. And you'll see in their sales over time, it doesn't look like much is happening, but that's because you've kind of got the one legacy product which has been falling, and these new products have been gaining, but net they're kind of a bit cancelling it out. But what I like about SDI now is, that amalgam piece is nearly getting so small that, even if the sales drop by 25%, it's not really going to impact the kind of overall sales. And we started to see that in the first half result that came out in February. And I think we're going to see more of it in the second half result. And over this time, SDI has been, investing in R&D. They've had a stated goal where they're going to release 1 or 2 new products every year. And their balance sheet, I think, has really come a long way in the last couple of years. We had a special dividend a year ago. They paid off the very last of their debt in the last half, the last 1.5 million. So, you're sitting today with a balance sheet that's got, 11 million of cash. They've got 10 million in undrawn bank facilities that they can use at any time, whether that's, COVID disruptions, to invest further in R&D, little acquisitions maybe here and there. And the other thing to remember is as well, they own their manufacturing facility down in Melbourne, which, insulates them a bit from, kind of rent increases. And it's a kind of a 10 million asset that's on the balance sheet that's kind of been fully paid for as well. So it's got a market cap of plus minus 100 million today. But of that 100 million, you've got 11 million in cold hard cash. You've got 9 million in a manufacturing facility that they own. So, 20 million out of 100 million is like cold hard assets. And then you've got a business that's, been around for a long time, well established, pays a dividend quite regularly. It's on, not a huge yield, 3% thereabouts, fully franked. But it's one of those ones where you can look back at its kind of dividend history and track record, and it's been a regular dividend payer. I wouldn't say it's, massively growing, but it has definitely been a consistent dividend payer for, those people who, tend to have a bit of a yield focus.
Let's have a look at the ownership. It's largely owned by individual insiders, and around 45% is owned by the founder and chairman. Tell us about him.
Yeah, so he founded the business, ran it for kind of many years. And then, as we see a lot, I guess, with, founders and CEOs, they still want to be involved in the business, but they don't want to, have the trials and tribulations of kind of running it. So, he's transitioned to the chairman role over the last couple of years. And actually his daughter, Samantha, is now the CEO and has been for the last, I think, 3 years, could be going on 4 years now. And, she's, I think, brought a whole new energy to SDI, has really kind of focused on the R&D and new products and growing the aesthetics business and the tooth whitening and all these other great cosmetic dentistry products that they have in their arsenal, and marketing those to dentists kind of globally. So it's kind of, I think the second generation coming and wanting to put their own stamp on it, and, with that kind of youthful enthusiasm to say, okay, yes, we're going to go and do this, we're going to go and do that. And I think she's done quite a good job, and they've managed the transition, I think, pretty well. That can also sometimes be a risk in the original CEOs, founders, not wanting to let go and let the new CEO kind of take the reins fully. But I think they've, in large part, managed that transition very well. And Samantha's, definitely kind of leading the business and taking all the kind of necessary decisions and driving the strategy. Great having her father there as the chairman, great institutional knowledge, where the business has come from, has large kind of networks within the whole industry that can be leveraged. So it is a kind of a high insider ownership business, which, a lot of people do like to see, and it's definitely better to have it than not, as I always say. But I think it's one that's kind of been overlooked by the market to some extent, as they've been going through this kind of, as I said, the product transition. But I think we're really getting to the inflection point now where the new products are really going to start coming into their own, and the market is going to really start sitting up and taking notice of the sales expansion, the R&D, the new product launches, the pristine balance sheet that they've managed to get themselves into over the last 2 or 3 years. So I think it'll definitely want to be on the lookout as we come into results season in August.
We also like to look at the risks of any company. Are there any risks that you've been able to identify?
Oh, look, like all companies, they were heavily disrupted by COVID back in 2020. If you look at their results from 19 to 20 to the first half of 2021, they really are a bit of a roller coaster. And that's a function of, lockdowns in their various markets or whatever. The US is a big market for them. The UK is also a big market for them on the international front. And obviously Australia is a decent sized market as their home market. So I think, the impacts of COVID are, can definitely swing the results one way or another. But thankfully, the UK is well on its way to opening up and it's pretty much fully open from what I can garner from friends who live there. The US similar. Australia obviously back into lockdowns for, extended periods in kind of Greater Sydney, Southeast Queensland as well. And mini lockdowns, I think, are going to be part of the course based on the kind of federal government's roadmap for the next kind of 6 or 7 months. So that's definitely a key risk. The other key risk for them, I guess, is the exchange rate. They do export a lot. They've got a lot of kind of offshore earnings. So, what happens with the Aussie dollar versus the US dollar versus the euro versus the pound, the Brazilian real. Brazil is actually quite a big market for them as well. Currency risk is one of the things to kind of keep in mind there. But hopefully, with so many different currencies, you can get a bit of balancing out. But, a sustained weakness in the Aussie dollar or a sustained strengthening of the Aussie dollar kind of against all currencies is going to impact the profits one way or the other.
So we're recording today on August the 5th. When do the annual results come out? When should we be keeping an eye out for these?
So SDI, they generally report around the third week of August. I haven't got the email to say when they're coming out, but they generally do announce, our results will be coming out, and, the CEO will be doing an investor webinar. So I would say sometime in that third week in August. Unfortunately, for a lot of your listeners who will well know, the third week in August is probably the busiest week of reporting season. So it might be hard to kind of catch the webinar, but I would expect them sometime in that third week in August.
And as always, we talk about ownership, and of course, you don't really ever have any ownership in any particular companies that you talk about. So let's hear about that.
Yeah, I don't own any shares directly in any ASX microcap companies. I just avoid that because it just creates too many conflicts of interest doing shows like this, doing my own work. But I do, invest in microcap companies through a couple of fund managers who operate in the space. And that's how I kind of get access to the asset classes is through some of these fund managers. But, I'm not influencing their decisions on a day-to-day basis. I'm buying, selling what they hold in the fund's respective portfolios. So yeah, not owning directly just clears away so many conflicts of interest and issues that can come up, and compliance is a major factor in financial services these days. But, I really love the asset class. I think it's one of the few places left where, good active managers can actually generate alpha, because for one, you're not competing with ETFs. There's no microcap ETF that you can invest in Australia. It's even hard to find them globally. And even when you do, I don't really think they achieve what they say how to achieve. So yeah, your active fund manager is one of the ways that you're going to get access to this asset class if that's something you're interested in.
So Mark Tobin, Coffee Microcaps, thank you very much for joining me again today.
Thanks, Phil. Great to be back on.
If you found this podcast helpful, please tell a friend, especially if it's someone who needs to start thinking about investing for their future. You'll be helping them and helping me to keep this show on the road.
Shares for Beginners is for information and educational purposes only. It isn't financial advice, and you shouldn't buy or sell any investments based on what you've heard here. Any opinion or commentary is the view of the speaker only, not Shares for Beginners. This podcast doesn't replace professional advice regarding your personal financial needs, circumstances, or current situation.
And thank you for listening to my podcast.
Did you know that personal information, like addresses and phone numbers, is collected and sold by data brokers across the internet? Fortunately, Aura steps in, scanning the web, sending you alerts, and requesting the removal of your info when found. Get a 14-day free trial of Aura's full toolkit, including ID theft protection, parental controls, and more at aura.com/safety. That's AURA.com/safety.